Good evening, good evening, good evening. Straight Talk, episode 13. The Straight Talk team are back with myself, Jay's Fight Talk, my good friend, No Punches Pulled co-host, and Boxing Brain, Statman, Liam Tully. How are we, brother?
I'm all good, brother. I'm all good. It's good to be back. I feel like the rant that we're going to have is needed after last weekend. But we'll find some positives in with the things that have got us wound up a bit. That's for sure, mate. But yeah, good to be back, isn't it?
It is. It's been a couple of weeks, commitments and life has just got in the way of Straight Talk. But look, we're back. We're hoping to be back with a bang. Firstly, then, I'll touch on the weekend. I know we did the No Punches Pulled podcast last night where we sort of did a breakdown and a review. But now the sort of the dust has settled and other fights have come to the forefront and we're sort of focusing on this weekend. What's your take on this past weekend's fight? What I mean from that, Liam, is I've got sort of winners and losers from the weekend and focal and talking points. I want your take on it before I give you my take. So sort of, what's your take from the weekend as a whole?
I honestly think that if boxing finished at 5:30 on Sunday morning after Canelo and Skull, and we didn't have the Inoue cards, my mood would still be pretty low. But Espinosa, Inoue, Cardenas sort of saved boxing. Sounds so corny to say, but it's the reality. They restored a bit of faith, didn't they? I mean, I didn't stay up to watch it Sunday night because I was done after the previous two. When I watched it Monday morning, it was Espinosa. We said the only thing that beats him at that weight is the scales because of the size of him. I don't see any boxer, and unfortunately for Nick Ball, being able to get close to him is the reality. And look, everyone said that Inoue's opponent shouldn't be in the ring with him. That it was a showcase for Inoue. In the same way that people said William Skull shouldn't be in the ring with Canelo. However, Skull just wanted to run, use Forrest Gump and flipping Carl Lewis as his training partners, and just focused on running and getting out of the way.
Not Carl Lewis. Not Carl Lewis. He's not a. We're not suggesting he's cheap.
Good point. Whereas at least Cardenas had a go. He was hitting Inoue, even in round 7, before he was then dropped at the end of that round. He was still coming back and hitting Inoue. And that's what we want from fights. And this is going to come on to something else that I know we're going to touch on. Sunday night had nothing to do with Riyadh season other than it being emblazed on Inoue's shorts because we know he's got the partnership or whatever it's called with Turkey. But that was the only, relation that was there that night. Friday and Saturday night were all Riyadh. They were all Turkey. It was all Ring Magazine. And it suffered because of it. Look, the conversation, and I know your views on this because we chatted on the camera of, are we now getting to a point where the Saudi money is affecting the quality we're getting from the boxes? Look, we've been on this path, I think, for the last 4 or 5 months, but we've been saved by the fact that some fights, i.e. both Bivol Beterbiev fights, Usyk and Fury's rematch, delivered above and beyond what we expected. But if we're being honest, those cards have not delivered in the same ways, if that makes sense. Right back at the very start, when the Saudi money came in and we got the Day of Reckoning cards, bar Filip Hrgovic and Mark Demori, that was every other fight on that card was genuinely competitive. I mean, we didn't know at the time what Dubois was going to do until he got in there with Miller. Parker and Wilder, again, we didn't know what was going to happen because we didn't realise just how short Wilder was. All that card was listed with very good fights, and that was the benchmark, wasn't it, to start with Saudi? Now, what we got at the weekend, let's leave Times Square for a minute. That was an anomaly that they wanted to try something, so let's leave that there. But Saturday's Riyadh cards, are you telling me that William Skull would only fight Canelo because of the Saudi money, because it's the biggest fight? Not at all. That fight wasn't needed with Saudi money. There wasn't really, and yes, if it was an amazing card, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation now. But if we're being honest, there's not a single fight on that card from Saturday night, Sunday morning that has only been made because of Turkey and the money. In reality, those fights could have been made on any card by Golden Boy and Matchery and Queensbury for $4 million less a piece for each fighter. And that would have been what it was. The Saudi money and greed has meant that someone like William Skull's coming out from a career high payday from barely throwing a punch for 36 minutes. Someone like Martin Bacoli, we say that what Bacoli's been able to do is that money for his country is fantastic. Agreed. However, that $3 million he got for 26 hours notice against Joseph Parker has ruined him. There is no hunger in Martin Bacoli anymore.
It's gone.
There is fire. It is gone. Martin Bacoli's performance on Saturday means that he's now going to have to come over to the UK on a boxer card on Sky Sports.
Oh, I think we've lost Liam there.
That's the reality. Turkey.
It's frozen. Yeah, got you back. Yeah.
Sorry, mate, as I was just saying, Bacoli's now going to have to use bench a Lomon boxer and fight on Sky Sports because Turkey won't touch him for a couple of fights now because as much as you can make excuses for the Parker performance, to turn up at £299 after supposedly an 11-week training camp and perform like he did against the Jagba, that's not going to stoke the fire of fans. I mean, Badu Jack coming off of a 3-year layoff to defend his well. I mean, it was just not what these Saudi cards are meant to be. It's not what the February 22nd card was. It's not what the first Fury and Usyk fight card was more than the one we got in December. It's unfortunately... We're now just getting our standard Saturday night fight nights, but we're paying 20 quid on pay-per-view.
And we're told that, we're told that the greatest fights.
That's what it's become, unfortunately, mate. And the money does play a part of that. Look, if you were getting told all of a sudden you're going to earn £4 million more a month at work, I'm sure as much as you say it wouldn't affect your productivity,
absolutely,
unconsciously, there'd be an effect to it. And that's the negative side to money. Money can be a fantastic thing. And in a lot of ways, the eyeballs that are now on boxing because of Turkey and the money are fantastic. But when we're having to sit through what we sat through at the weekends, it makes you think, actually, I'd be quite happy if we maybe got super fights 2 or 3 times a year because the prices would actually pay more.
So, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a couple of points that I'll take from that. I think the money is affecting the hunger, the motivation in terms of the fighters. It's also affecting the way that promoters are matchmaking now. It's like, I'm trying to think of another sporting analogy. You say somebody took over the Premier League again, and what they do is they come in and they change the format and they say, right, all the top 6 are playing each other. So you get Spurs, Arsenal as I say top 6, but Spurs, Arsenal, United, City, Liverpool. I was going to say Everton, but the bigger game. So they met Liverpool play Chelsea, United, City, and after a month of that, so it's great. All the big teams are playing each other, but after a month of that, you'd get bored. The level would peter out because they know who to expect, what they're playing, and then the likes of, no disrespect to these teams, I'm just picking 2 lower teams. So Wolves and I nearly said Fulham, but they're doing pretty well. But say Ipswich, your team. No one's going to want to watch them games because they're spoiled at the top end. But then you lose your hunger for the top end. So what's happened is Turkey's come in, he's got these pockets full of money and he can make the fights that nobody else could make. I beg to differ. I believe that some of the fights could have been made, as you said, irrespective. Even some of the big fights that he gave us right back in the beginning. But what he's done is he's taken all the big fights, clustered them all together, and now we're stuck for big fights. So now we're getting drip-fed. Not Skull versus Canelo is not a big fight. I'm sorry, it's not a big fight. I know it's world champion versus world champion. Up until 6 months ago, barely anyone had heard of William Skull. It's not a fight. It's just that Canelo wanted that belt to collectively have all the belts. But because the Saudis are not worried about turning a profit, for example, their shows now are purely just for television. So it's about the spectacle. So it looks fantastic on TV. That card at the weekend, Friday, looked amazing on TV. But in terms of the fan experience, none. Because they thought they were having fans up until a couple of weeks before. That changed. They couldn't have any fans. That then takes away the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is sucked out of it. So what you've got to imagine is a fighter that previously had this burning desire inside of him to be successful for not only himself, his legacy or her legacy, but also to change their and their family's life forever. Now think that they're going out into a bear pit of an atmosphere or a home venue and the raucous crowd and it's the same football, it's the 12th man and it gives you that extra little percentage. Imagine now then, on the flip side, in a parallel universe, he's got 5 times his biggest payday now up front before he's even stepped into the ring. There's no fans there whatsoever. You can't tell me that the motivations can be the same. The hunger, the desire, it can't be the same. We're seeing it with the performances that we saw from the likes of Haney. He didn't even barely threw a punch because he was scared of getting countered.
Yeah.
We saw Ramirez, who's probably washed now at the top level, and it pains me to say that. He's been sort of force-fed to a couple of people. Rowley, we didn't know he had that in him, and I'm happy to say that I was proven wrong, but he boxed completely different to how he normally boxes. Ryan Garcia, another one. I don't think he gives a shit. I don't think Ryan Garcia's given a shit really since the Haney fight, and I don't think he really gave a shit about that. It was just Haney didn't turn up.
Yeah.
He just didn't turn up, did he? Haney thought he could just half-arse it, sort of 60% job. And we're just not seeing what the quality of fights that should be expected. We got charged. I had to pay. What did I pay? With 22 quid. I could have paid 35, but I knew I wasn't going to make the Canelo fight. I thought I ain't killing myself to get up to watch Canelo when I know I can pretty much say what's going to happen. So I just bought the initial fight on Friday, which was 22 quid. I feel ripped off, if I'm honest.
Yeah, look. We moaned as boxing purists in general absolutely lambasted the Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. fight from the week before last. However, in retrospect, that was a fight. That's what we want to see. That is two men for 36 minutes leaving every part of themselves, regardless of what their ability is inside of the ring.
And just to add this before you, because it's relevant, they are both multimillionaires. Multimillionaires that have been brought up middle to upper class with money. So that sort of contradicts what I'm saying about the Saudis, but shows you if your hunger and your motivation's right, you get fights like we got last week.
And that's exactly where I was going with it. And so I'll come on to my other point. We actually said when we done a review that the fact that all 5 fights on that Spurs card went to decisions, for a change, we weren't moaning because they were all entertaining fights. The worst one, I say the worst one, Chev Clark and Vidal Riley probably was the 12-round type of fight we expected it to be. That was probably the least entertaining one. But it was still watchable. It wasn't, they were both throwing punches. They were both having to go. It was, as 36 minutes went, as I was enjoying my takeaway before I came on with you boys, it was an enjoyable fight to watch. However, we got from the 3 fights in Times Square to the whole Riyadh season card the night before, we didn't get a single stoppage. We only got a couple of knockdowns in there.
Yeah.
The most entertaining fight on the Times Square card was the NYPD against the New York Fire Department.
And they were shite, but they've tried to fight, didn't they?
Which was 2 amateurs having a bit of a tear-up like you see outside of Wetherspoons or the Yateses on a flipping Saturday night, as we say sometimes. But that's the difference. Boxing was saved by Sunday. Espinoza is a special, special talent, and we know he's going to move up at some point. And the question with Espinoza is similar to the question we've asked about Terence Crawford through the years. At what weight does it catch up with him? At what weight does his undoubted skills and ability catch up with him in terms of the fact there's a size difference? And we don't know the answer to that with Espinoza. We don't know how high he's going to go. And Inoue was Inoue. Again, he was that is why for me, and because he's more active, he is in my top 3 on the pound for pound. He's more active than both Usyk and Crawford. And I can actually make an argument, yes, recency bias, that he's my number 1 at the moment. Because when he was knocked down, and it was similar against Luis Nery when he was knocked down, same shot actually, he's dropped his hand down and he's taken a left hook. Akhmadaliev, who we'll come on to in a minute, will love that because we know his left hook's his money punch. But he didn't panic, did he? Instead of spending the 3rd round trying to get on his bike and recover, he arguably won the 3rd round.
Got stuck straight back in and carried on. And in the 7th round, when he got caught with 3 or 4 left hooks again, when he was on the ropes, instead of shelling up and looking to just survive the round, he flipped it around and had Cardenas down and as good as out on his feet by the end of the 7th round. It's an attitude thing with Inoue. I reckon this Saudi partnership is purely so Turkey leaves him alone, if that makes sense. So you can say, right, you're giving me the money, but I'm still doing things my way. I'm still having my fights in Japan. Okay, I'm going to appease Grandad Bob and come fight in Vegas. Why am I here? We got our God only knows.
God knows why. But Inoue is one of the few top-end fighters that, for me, still has the same hunger as before a Riyadh season ambassadorship and money came into boxing. Yes, he hasn't fought on an official Saudi card, but we know the money's there because it's emblazed on his trunks his last 3 fights. It's on all his team's fight kit.
Yeah.
It shows that if you want to be hungry enough, the same as Ben and Eubank, you can have all the money in the world, but when you crave proving yourself inside the squared circle, you are still able to do it. And that's the difference.
I think it's a cultural thing, possibly with Inoue. You can see that. I don't think it's about ego. So I think culturally he wants to win, and it's about honor and legacy for him. And you can see that in terms of an ego, obviously he has an ego, but it's not inflated. I noticed every time he gets knocked down, or the times that he's been knocked down, he's not quick to get straight back up to prove up. Normally, when a fighter gets knocked down, that's why Eubank got not just. Excuse me. The reason he got stopped by Liam Smith is he got up straight away and he's falling all over. So he was ill prepared to take shots again. I used to watch my brother practice spinning round to make yourself dizzy, pointing at the floor, and then drop down, get back up, and have to defend yourself. So you're used to being disorientated. Now, if you watch Inoue, he's not interested in, because a lot of the reactions with boxers is, whoa, shit, who's looking, who saw that, and they're up. Inoue just gets himself up to his knee, takes a breath, looks around, gets his bearings back, registers the count, then gets up, prepares, and goes again. You can see that guy just wants to be the best. It's not about money for him because he could stay at home. You know, he's been a multimillionaire probably since he came on everybody's radar because he's been filling out 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 seater stadiums for the past 5 years. Maybe longer. So like you said, the Riyadh thing is probably just to get him out of his inbox, to get him from pestering his manager to do this, to do that. He's like, okay, then you've given me, what was it, 15 million US dollars as like
across 3 or 4 fights, yeah.
But I think that's not his fight purse, is it? That's just
to have the
sponsorship money, just to have Riyadh. Maybe that's why it's plastered all over his kit. But look, ultimately he saved the weekend, and that those fights on that card, I feel for me, saved the weekend. It had a less manufactured feel, did that card. All the other cards, you could feel that they'd been. I know cards are put together, and I'm sort of contradicting myself. What I mean is, we're being force-fed super fights, so they're building fights into super fights. So they should have headlined 3 cards with those 3 fights at the weekend as main events, and they could have strung it out over a month. But instead, they stuck them all into one card. Each fight was crap, and it just got worse and worse and worse. I'm pretty sure I fell asleep on our live and tried to style it out at one stage. And that's irrespective of whether I'm tired or not. If a fight's good enough, I aren't falling asleep.
You're locked in. You're just fully invested. Yeah.
We're locked in. We're talking. At one point, I'm pretty sure I was snoring, slavering the lot. I definitely slept at some point on Friday night on a live. And that tells you everything you need to know. Look, Turkey might be a boxing guy now, but he ain't a boxing guy. Turkey's not a boxing guy. He's not a guy that's been in and around the sport. The guy is I don't know where he's from. I just know that he's got himself into politics, got himself a position within politics, and now he's the bridge between the Saudis' oil money and the Western world, and they're doing it through sport. You know, whatever. I'm not going to get into the political side and the whitewashing agenda, etc. But I just think that the money has definitely changed boxing. I'm hoping not irreversibly so, because if this is it for forever, then I'm sad.
This is the thing. I mean, last year we were hanging on to what Frank was doing with, you know, some very solid York Hall and Trafford Centre cards where he was bringing through his prospects, and he finished the year with the Magnificent Seven, didn't he, when Denzel Bentley won at Wembley Arena. Look, I know we've got a very good fight this weekend with Kakachi and Woods. I know we've got the Fisher Allen rematch the weekend after that, and that leads into Taylor Esserman. But both Frank and Eddie and Ben, although who knows where Ben what Ben is really doing, his next shows, Oakwell, need to start stepping up their game because you're neglecting your core market. Frank has made this move over to the Zone, the streaming service that he was never going to work on. That's now his home. So there's more money there for him. However, just because it makes it easier to do the fights with matchroom fighters doesn't mean that you need to just put them on these supercards. The UK schedule up until July is weak, if we're being really honest. What we're actually getting in the UK is weak. I think the best fight card I can think of coming up is Masood and McGregor from Matchroom in June. Tickets have gone on sale for that today, and I'm not surprised that half of the arena in Birmingham's already gone, because that is a great fight with a decent enough undercard on it. But we need more of that. We need the second half of the year. So let's say the second half of the year will start after Usyk and Dubois at Wembley, because we know how much is going to go into that from Frank's side of things. We got Bam in America that night. UK from August onwards needs to be red hot from Ben, from Eddie, from Frank, and it needs to get the British public back into it, because you're losing your people that are watching Saturday night football and here there's a fight on and they're going to decide to watch it because it's not there anymore. We're getting, yes, okay, we've got it for the next 4 weekends in a row, but after that, what's to come? We then have another 3-week break, but then it's the pay-per-view for the Usyk Dubois fight, and we don't know what's to come, if that makes sense. So it needs to be an uptake, because like you say, the Saudi money is great, it's to an extent, but when you're killing off your core market, that's the issue. And before anyone says it in the comments, we got that good GBM cards in a couple of weeks, haven't we, on the Friday night, which is Terry Harper.
We have. That's sort of snuck under the radio. Good evening, Sam. That's our our No Punches Pulled co-host, Sam Walker at SW Fight Hub. Make sure you get over there, like, comment, share, and subscribe. I mean, there are some cards on the horizon. We've got a really good fight this weekend. I'm looking forward to that. I don't think you can. We were speaking about yesterday. It's one of them fights that, irrespective of what's on the line, my belt's up. So I get my 3% for owning the wheelie bin green colour. They're ignoring my emails, but I'm just mounting it up, and then I'll sue them in a couple of years. Stick an invoice in. They'll probably send me a pay less notice or a cease and desist, but it's all fun and games. It's good fight, and there are a few domestic fights. I'm just worried that this super fight nonsense is just gonna make the gap wider, so that the GBMs and the likes suffer, because their fights are not seen as the super fights. So the sort of the casual audience that will drift in to small hall shows, the lads will have a night out, girls will have a night out, and they'll drift into. Are they going to drift away and save it for the super fights, the glamorous, the glitz and glamour? Don't know, man. Boxing's changing. I were quick to say it's changed. I think it's the landscape's changing. I don't know whether boxing needs to come together as a whole, and maybe they're not going to stand up to Turkey, are they? Because they're terrified of him pulling out. But we can't give him ultimate control. It's monopolising the sport. Which, evening DJ Pat, it's monopolising the sport. Which people have always poked at the UFC, but the UFC is an independent company that are a brand. Boxing's not. Boxing's a sport, and it's becoming like the UFC, but boxing as a whole. Do you get what I'm saying? So some people think MMA is the UFC. It's not. There is MMA. There are other organisations. I watch many, but the UFC is seen as the main one. Sorry, go on. What are you going to say?
Because you say that a lot of people that think the UFC is MMA, but that comes down to the marketing power and the juggernaut that is the UFC, and how well that company's done from where it started, etc., etc. Boxing, for me, Turkey's ultimate aim for boxing is to turn it into the UFC.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
I hate it.
Boxing is a lot different to MMA in the sense that you can't do it. All you'll end up doing is creating a great divide down the middle of boxing, where it will be back in the days before the Queensberry rules, if that makes sense. That's all that will happen if Turkey gets his way, and we don't want to see it. Look, the Wassermans and the GBMs and
bread and butter, grassroots.
They are still, Mick Hennessy, people like that. They are still people. Dennis Hobson. We still want their cards to have a platform, and we don't want their cards to become where the Saudi rejects, so to speak, go. They can still hold a place and do solid cards, but at some point, fighters are going to get so disillusioned with your Matchrooms, your Queensberries, your boxes, because they're poking their head into it, that they're going to go to these small ball shows. But if the broadcast rights aren't there, there isn't too far-fetched to think GBM may have to, broadcast their shows on YouTube at some point. I know they've got the DAZN deal at the moment. It's fantastic. But what if they don't keep it? What if the Zone decides that they've got Golden Boy, they've got Queensberry, they've got Matchroom? We don't need GBM. That's the thing. And they're not going to stand up to Turkey, because if Turkey pulls out the money, and then goes and does it, say, in another sport, then boxing will, be tarnished forever. But it's sports washing in an effect. The way that the media are being controlled on what they're allowed to comment on, the way certain media outlets are banned from attending shows. Yes, there's some reasons for
That's very UFC.
Yeah, it's very UFC. It's almost as if, right, if you don't follow the party line, so to speak, you're not coming in, and that is making it a closed shop. It's a dangerous area. We're going to get some good fights, like Canelo Crawford. We're going to get Bivol Beterbiev 3, etc., etc. We're going to get some good fights. But what is the damage going to be to the wider boxing sphere? That's what I'm interested in. When we're doing our review show around Christmas time, which is a long way away, I'll be interested to see what the actual boxing landscape like. Because at the moment, it's worrying, because you can only see it going in a downward curve.
No, I agree, Liam, and we haven't got a crystal ball, and nobody knows what's around the corner. But I'd like to think that Turkey will also have advisors that are advising him on moves to make within the sport, and I'm hoping somewhere, even Eddie, Ben Shalom or Frank, maybe Frank more so than anybody, or even Barry Hearn, have conversations with him and just explain to him about I'm not saying he doesn't understand the history of boxing and understand grassroots boxing, but it's not all glitz and glamour. I think what scares me is fighters getting an unrealistic expectation of paychecks. So the smaller halls can't sustain it because they're having to pay more to get fighters just to fight on their cards, because they expect to be getting 20 grand for a regional title, whereas in reality they'd get 1,500 quid or 2 grand while they're cutting the teeth, so to speak, at grassroots level. I've played football when I was young, Sunday League football, and there'd always be a lad, we got 20 quid a game, and there'd be a lad that expected 70 quid a game because he thought it were better, but he'd been paid that somewhere else before. And, there'll be an expectation, and then if he pulls out, it's going to be an unsustainable business model, because the likes of Hearn and Warren and stuff and Shalom can't afford to they wouldn't have paid these paychecks if Turkey hadn't been backing them. We know that. It's not secret.
The narrative, last thing I'm going to say on it before we move on to a few other bits, the narrative last year of the Saudi money will make the UK cards better works last year, works more on the Queensberry side. So we got 3 Magnificent 7 shows from Frank, which were fantastic. We got Joyce and Chisora, which was a great card. I was at that card, but that was a fantastic card. And that was all attributed to the Saudi money, meaning that the strength and depth of these cards can be better. We've had the conversation before. But the reality is, at the start of 2025, we haven't seen that trend continue. It's almost as if, we've done it for a while to, keep our home market sweet. But now the reality is we're going to focus all our eggs over here. I've said it already. We need to see cards in the second half of the year. Look, we've got some good fights coming up, but we need better quality of cards. I think the best card out of all the ones coming up is probably it's the GBM cards. But away from that GBM card in terms of what we're talking about, it's probably Taylor Esserman, or actually the Portman Road card that's been announced with Hooney stepping in, which we're going to come into. That's got 2 British titles, a vacant European title, and it's got some good fights on it. But that's the quality we need, rather than it just being pick and mix, kind of, you never know what you're going to get kind of thing.
No, I agree, and we could be here all night, so we'll put that one to bed, and we'll come back at Christmas and see what the boxing landscape timestamp it, guys. You touched on it there, and I suppose it's a good segue, really. So your home fighter, let's just say that the fighter from your hometown, just down the road from you, the football team that you support, the championship ground is going to open itself up to.
Couldn't help himself.
Mate,
done
listen,
so well.
Bradford City got knocked out of the playoffs by Ipswich 3-1 in 1987, and I was there, and I cried for 3 hours. I will never forgive them or Middlesbrough. If I ever see Bernie Slaven, consider this your warning. I will smack you in your mouth. You ruined me for about a fortnight, mate. We beat him at home. We lost 2-1 away. And what made it worse is when he scored, he jumped up in front of us, the away fans. I was so devastated. Anyway. Portman Road. Is it Portman Road? Because I always say Fratton Park.
Road.
Portman Road. Fratton Park is Luton, is it?
Portsmouth.
Yeah. Oh, it's all south. Anyway, listen. Anywhere south of Leeds to me is southern. Right. It's all Fratton Park. So look, Fabio Wardley is getting his not his big chance. He's getting a headline in his home football stadium against a massive name. That massive name has since pulled out. I'm happy about that because I cannot stand Jarrell Miller. He's a drug cheat. One thing about him, he's always faced up to it, but he never really speaks about it. But look, he's a multiple PED failure, right? He's injured or he's messed up his timings on his cycle, allegedly. Or not even allegedly, that's me saying that, and I'm just pissing around. Look, he's injured, he's withdrawn. In steps Justice Hooney. Now, a lot of people will say, why? Who? We knew he is. We followed him probably for the last 18 months. I say 2 years maybe. He's rose up pretty quick. He's a dangerous opponent, but I think an easier night's work for Fabio Wardley. That's my take on it. What where are you at with it, Liam? Because I know you rate Wardley high.
Firstly, it's the promise that Fabio's been made for the last 2 years that you get a Portman Road fight is finally being delivered. I think it's the summer where Ipswich don't need to do any major work to the ground, so they can let Fabio have a fight. They're letting Ed Sheeran do 3 concerts there in July, which again is something that's been spoken about in our neck of the woods for years, but it's always been redevelopment of Portman Road, so it never happened.
They've only just got electricity.
The opportunity is fantastic, and I'm hoping if I get a bit of luck with this job interview tomorrow and I land a job, I have enough time to get myself a ticket for it, because it is literally 15 minutes down the road. I've got no excuse not to go if I can, and I'm more inclined to go now. It's Justice Hooney for the reasons we covered. Miller should be nowhere near a boxing ring. I carried that energy when he came back and had to do our fight. Yes, he got stiffed on the cards against Ruiz last August, but I wasn't that upset. It was Miller, which is what it is. And when he got this opportunity, it was, oh, okay, right, we're using the brash big American. He's going to trash talk and sell the fight. Then he turned up in that freaking Norwich.
What a dick.
Decided to bitch slap Fabio, and it's just like, we don't need this. So I'm glad he's gone. Justice Hooney, if you go off of box rec, this is number 9 against number 11 in the heavyweights division. So evenly matched. Miller was down at 20 something. So good. It's a step up if you believe box rec in the right direction, which you don't always get with stands and opponents. There's a WBA interim trinket attached to it. I mean, it's worth even less than the belt Kubrat Pulev holds. But it's not about the belt for me. For me, this is Fabio Wardley's opportunity to get a homecoming and take another step on the ladder. Because as we keep saying, Usyk, Fury, etc. are on their way out. Dubois going to be around for a while. Parker's not going to go anywhere until he's had his door
opening for somebody.
This is the door opening, and the former white-collar boxer that 6 years ago headlined in a tent in Christchurch Park across the other side of Ipswich is now headlining in the football stadium. It's a fantastic story. But the card's good as well. We were just talking about quality of cards. You got Sam Gilly and Lewis Green going at British Commonwealth, and I think there might be a vacant European on that as well. Pierce O'Leary's getting a shot at the European title. Stephen Ward, he beat Tommy McCarthy in Belfast earlier this year, is getting a shot at Mexican called Mike Perez. Yes, Stephen Ward is probably a shell of a fighter he was, but at least it's a step up from him from where he was. He's getting an opportunity. Lewis Richardson, the only British Olympic medalist from Paris. Yes, he's making his debut because Colchester 15 minutes down the road. So there'll be, I know a lot of people that have brought tickets since that was announced on Friday. So it's a solid card. It's a better test for Fabio than Miller was because half of the battle with Miller is dealing with his size. It's not necessarily what he throws in attack, but how do you deal with something 320
You're not
pounds?
throwing him about, are you?
Yeah, how do you deal with that? We saw how long it took Daniel Dubois to deal with him. It took him till the last 30 seconds. And even then, he was stopped on his feet. So we may get a better style matchup now. Justice Hooney, it's probably too soon for him. I mean, he's coming off the back of knocking out early 2 puddings in Patega and Rabatti that, you know, came straight off the dessert buffet that was left backstage for meant to be for after the fight, but they couldn't help themselves. So it's a step up for the Aussie. He was down as a TBA for another 6 rounds of that night. So he's in camp. He's not off the couch. He's in camp. He's in some sort of shape. And the way Justice Hooney gets spoken about, yes, by himself, by
sorry, my dogs.
Eddie Hearn in the matchroom lot, because he is a matchroom fighter. This is the sort of fight Justice Hooney should be winning. He should be able to handle the former white collar boxer Fabio Wardley, no trouble. But the reality is, I think it's too soon. It's a better fight, but I just think what Fabio's done in the last 18 months, beating Nathan Gorman, the draw, and then the win over Fraser Clark, I think they're just standing in good stead.
Just before I answer DJ Pat, well, I'll use it. DJ Pat says Honey is ranked number 1 in the WBO ranking, so I think it'll be a good fight overall. I've got a feeling Hooney might ruin Wardley's homecoming. I've not seen anything out of Hooney yet that makes me think he can beat Wardley in a boxing match. And I don't think he can beat. I think his best chance is possibly beat him in a fight. I think Hooney could. I likened him to the Taffer brothers, and I'm not saying that because he's brown or possibly Maori or Polynesian or something. He reminds me of him because he's got that power, but if you can navigate that, he's not got that. His hands aren't that good, and the Taffer brothers' hands are not that good. I wouldn't dream of saying that to the face, and I'm just about got the balls to say it on a live. What I mean is, we've seen Fabio go to the well before now. He got a bad cut on his nose, against an Olympian, and boxed sort of 8 or 9 rounds with a broken, bashed-in nose, and eked out a draw. Take from that what you will. I thought Clark nicked it, but I've not watched it in a long time. I'm just being honest. I thought Clark nicked it, but look,
I thought Clark won it by rounds. That's me being honest. As much as I love.
So there you go. But look, he said he had a bad performance or not his best performance, and my gosh, did he make up for that in the rematch? Absolutely devastating fashion. He dispatched of Fraser Clark. But what I mean is, we've seen him in a war. We've seen his raw power. Whereas with Hooney, we've seen him fight tin cans and knock him over. He's not really had a fight, has he?
Hooney's best name on his record is Kevin Lorena. And if that fight was 12 rounds rather than 10 rounds, Lorena would have finished him down the stretch because he had Justice
nothing left.
Gates in the
nothing left. He was wobbling all over.
So that's the best one on Hooney's record. For Fabio Wardley, now some of the names I'm going to say here are more the name value of where they've been. So Eric Molina, he beat, who fought for a world title twice. Yes, Eric Molina isn't a world beater, but he's been in there and beat him. Nick Webb, he's done in a round for the English title. Nathan Gorman, like I said earlier. David Adelaide, who he beat for the British title as well. Like, yes, they're not stellar names, but what he has done is he's been in with kind of fighters there or thereabout on the fringes. And for me, he's done his apprenticeship now. Look, I love the white collar story with Fabio, but at some point it needs to be left alone. He is now an established professional boxer. He has made 2 defenses of the British title, 3 defenses of the Commonwealth title. Now it's the next move. The apprenticeship's over. You've got yourself in with a confident Australian who believes he is the second coming of whoever he believes he is the second coming of. So now you're going to have a test. Hooney, realistically, his best chance is to come out, stick it on Fabio, and hope he gets it done inside the first 4. That's reality.
Yeah.
If it goes further down the stretch, it favours. I mean, look, Fabio showed in his last fight he can blow anyone away inside 3 minutes. Fraser Clark's jaw still has the dent mark to attest to that story, but I just think it will need to be patient from Fabio. Get through the first 3 or 4 rounds, and when the inevitable drop in intensity comes from Hooney, take over. Everything work off his jab early on and then put a finish in. Similar to what he done to Adelaide. He allowed Adelaide to come onto him early in the fight, use up all of his energy, and as he was starting to tire in the 5th and 6th, he put his foot down and then stopped him in the 7th.
Sorry, Ed, I can't think of that fight without remembering Adelaide on his back telling Wardley he was shit.
Yeah.
You're shit while he was on his back.
On his back with blood pissing out of his mouth. That's the reality. We've seen Fabio Wardley, and he done something similar with Eric Molina back in 2021, I think it was. He allows Molina to have his best work in the first 3 rounds, and then over the next 3 broke him down and got a stoppage. Now, yes, the argument is that was Eric Molina's last fight, etc., etc. But there's a trademark there of how Fabio Wardley goes about his work. There's a blueprint that he follows, and he'll need to follow it similar to that against Hooney, because Hooney's best chance is inside the first 5 rounds. I don't think Hooney can maintain a pace for 12 rounds that anything to Fabio Wardley. Fraser Clark done it to Fabio in the first fight. It was blood, guts, and thunder, as John Fury would say. And I agree, Fraser nicked it from me on the night. I think the reason we ended up with the draw was because Fraser was knocked down in the 5th. Skewed the score.
Evened it out.
So we're going to find out. We're going to find out a lot about Hooney. We're going to find out a lot about Fabio. And there is a little bit of bias in it, but I do think Fabio will come away with a win. And I won't say he's an interim world champion because it doesn't matter. It's the next step. Then we talk about him moving towards a Martin McCauley or someone that's number 1s with other governing bodies. I mean, if he picks up this interim title, he'll stay down the WBA.
A Jagba for me.
Yeah.
I'd rather see him fight a Jagba than a
There
Coley.
you go.
I'm pissed off with a Coley, but sorry, go on, I'll let you finish. Sorry.
Well, there you go. It's got to be someone of that ilk because Usyk's going to do what he's going to do to finish his career. I'm not going to mention Tyson Fury because I don't want to see him come back. I'm tired. Oh, look, an announcement's been made. It's not about me anymore. Let's create some attention, whatever. Parker's shouldn't fight anyone unless it's Kabayel for the full WBC or WBO title or Usyk. That's where Parker goes. So
Belt or
Wardley now maneuvers himself.
Joshua.
Do I think we maybe see Kubrat Pulev this year?
God.
What it's got, I actually think we do. But I'm glad they're doing it first. I'm glad they're getting a good test before the Pulev fight for him.
Yeah, I thought we'd get the Pulev fight. I thought that's who we were going to have at the stadium, but for whatever reason, I don't see this fight being won by anybody that's not named Fabio Wardley, and I think he wins it however he wants to. I think he can knock him out. I think he can TKO him. I do see him getting him out of there. If it goes past 6 rounds, I think we're lucky. I think Fabio will jump on him himself. I don't think he's going to give Hooney the opportunity to jump on him. I think he's going to try put on a statement performance and then scream that he wants Joyce, Chisora. I'd like to see him in someone like Chisora. Someone who's going to give him a proper test. I'm not saying Clark didn't, but Clark's of a certain level. I'm on about someone who's battle-hardened at world level. I'm not... Chisora's on the slide, but he still gives any in the top 10 a tough night's work.
I'd be happy to see Wardley Chisora at the back end of the year. A part of me thought if Chisora hadn't fought in February, the call may have gone out for him to step in for Miller. Yeah. But Derek fighting in February and the way he fights because of the punches he takes, there's no way to get
he needs a few more.
He needs longer. I think, look, a lot of people were calling for Dillian White. I mean, let's just caveat.
No, the manager's it's his manager, isn't it?
Yeah, not anymore, but that didn't.
No, but they're tight,
yeah.
aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're tight. So look, it looks like we're going to get White Okoli on the Usyk Dubois card from a few things I've been seeing.
I'll take that.
Which I'll take. But that's the sort of level. I actually think Fabio
Riakporhe versus Wardley.
Riakporhe, Okoli, that's the sort of level we're talking about. And yeah, I think Chisora would be fun because it's Chisora. But do we need to see it at this point?
No. I know I suggested it, but I'm just picking names out.
It's the names. It's that next story, mate. It's that next step. Riakporhe's challenge for a world title at cruiserweight. Yes, he fell short, but he's got that to him. Okoli's a 2-division world champion thanks to Bridgerweight. You know, Chisora's done this and that. There's good British names there. Joe Joyce is a former interim world champion. We know how much.
Oh, leave Joe alone. Leave him alone.
You mentioned Joe yourself.
I know, but leave him alone.
But you know, there's good names there. He can do a good domestic fight down the backstretch this year, and then by 2026, the belts are going to go up like confetti, and we'll see where they land. And Fabio is putting himself in the shop window. Look, he would be an underdog for me against Parker and Dubois. I give him
a shot though.
He's got a shot, but I give him his best chance against Caballero. If you talk about where Caballero would be his best chance for me. But Fabio's improving all the time by his own admission. Definitely. He says he's still 2 years away from being the professional boxer he wants to be. So let's see where we are come 2027 with Fabio Wardley.
Definitely. Well, just one of the names that I mentioned there, Anthony Joshua. I thought we were imminently going to be announced, or it was going to be announced that he was fighting Tyson Fury. We haven't had that announcement, and today or yesterday we've seen Anthony Joshua's now having surgery on his elbow. Will we see Anthony Joshua in the ring again?
Yes.
You think so?
I think so. Look, this elbow surgery is a strange one because Eddie's been talking about it since 3 or 4 weeks after the Dubois fight. I don't know if he's had an operation that hasn't done what it's meant to, so now he's having a second operation. We don't know that, but we know there's been surgery needed because Eddie was quite upfront and said, look, this is the situation for Joshua's timeline. I want to get him back out in May. So you would assume there's been a procedure done down the back end of last year that hasn't done what it should have done, so he's having to have a second one.
Yeah.
I think with AJ, and it comes back to the conversation we've just been having about Usyk, etc., moving on. So there's a door opening. Anthony Joshua will see a heavyweight landscape without Fury, without Usyk, as something he can still play in. Yes, he got beat and stopped by Dubois, but if this is a long-term elbow injury, you know what boxers are like. He'll say to himself, well, now I'm healed, I know I can go in there and win. I don't believe that myself at this point, but that will be what he tells himself. So I think once Usyk's gone, which will be next year, as much as it pains me to say that, that's the reality with Usyk. We're on the farewell tour.
Yep.
Fury, you've just said, are we going to be thought we can get Joshua Fury announced? I hope we never see that. Not because I don't want to see the fight, but because it's 6 or 7 years past its sell-by date.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that fight, me.
I've lost interest in it, and that's more because of Tyson and Joshua. That's me being honest, because he's far-asked around and retired and came back too many times. I've lost interest in the Tyson Fury story. I think AJ believes that once Usyk moves on, there is still a path for him to be a player. So he
not for me.
Back.
Yeah.
Look, we talked about money earlier and everything else changing how these fighters are fighting. He's not the stay hungry lion that he was when he beat Charles Martin, when he had the Klitschko fight at Wembley, when he picks up the third belt against Parker in Cardiff. He's not that fighter anymore. And why should he be the same fighter? Because what he's achieved and what he's done is part of the legacy and the reason why British boxing is in the place it's in 2025. But what I will say, if he comes back, we're going to know within his first fight. So let's just say in a parallel world that Ajit Kabayel becomes the full WBC champion and his first defense, he'd choose Joshua as his first defense. We will know in that fight, No,
I was just thinking of Anthony Joshua on his back.
I know, but that's the reality. Like, you can see a path where if the champions are Dubois, Parker, Kabayel, he'll go for the one of the three he's not fought first, you
Yeah.
would imagine. You go towards Caballero, we'll know within 6 minutes of the Caballero fight if he's got it in him still, if that makes sense. If the hunger's still there, if the intensity that Anthony Joshua had on his rise up is still there. And that's the reality, mate. I think with this injury, it will be a case of, well, I've been injured for a while. I'm fully recovered now. And he's either going to come back and he's going to roll back the years. He's not that old, OJ. He's going to pick up a belt. He's going to pick up a belt again and have another run. Or it's going to go the way that many a fighter's comeback goes, and it's going to be the end of the story forever. But I do, in a long-winded way, we see Anthony Joshua again. I think we probably see him back against the fringe guys towards the end of this year, and then we probably see him in with, I think it will be Caballero in the spring of 2026.
Do you know who I think he'll come back against? Joe Joyce.
Go on.
I know. It's a winnable fight for Joe. I swear to God it is. But I'm past caring, if I'm honest. Any other business, Liam? I'm up to date with all my notes, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we end this week's episode?
We touched on it briefly earlier, and I feel like we need to do it because of the bad taste that's still left from last weekend. For domestic reasons, so this won't translate across the pond, Wood Kakachi this weekend is the type of fights we've been talking about wanting. There's a lot of questions in that fight. It's Lee Wood, for contractual dispute reasons, has been out of the ring since October 2023. Where's he at? He's now moved up in weight. What's he got left? Anto Kakachi had the year of his life in 2024. Can he roll on into that? And can he kick on into an even 25? It's a really good fight, mate. It's a fight that 3 years ago you would have favoured Lee Wood quite heavily in, if we're being really honest. But now, I mean, the bookies...
I think it's 60-40 in Kakachi's favour, mate.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It's 60-40 in Kakachi's favour. But it's a fantastic fight, mate, and that's something to look forward to. That card, again, is a solid enough card. Okay, you could probably do with one more even matchup on there, like we've got in the top fight. But saying that, Owen Cooper and Chris Kongo could be that fight. It's probably the first fight on the broadcast. I'm expecting Kongo to make a statement and show that he's got one more go left in him. But as we said last night, Chris Kongo's last two fights have been on the Wednesday of Riyadh season fight weeks, where they've put on those cards, haven't they, at the public workout. And he's looked lackluster and disinterested. Now, is that because he's been on those cards and he's, boxing low risk, picking up the wins because he knows he's going to without taking too many chances? Or is that because he doesn't have a hunger or fire anymore? Because we're going to find out. Owen Cooper showed that he can go into the fire against Eko Esserman. I know he got stopped in the end, but he had Esserman down and almost out in a couple of the rounds, and that was a fantastic fight. So as much as I'm expecting Chris Kongo to win it, and he's a massive underdog if people have a look at the odds, it all comes down to, again, what's left? What's the hunger? Does he want to still be doing it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of questions are going to have to be asked because both of these fighters are both come forward fighters. Neither of them boxes on the back foot. They both love a tear-up. They can both have a tear-up. I don't believe that Kakachi hits as hard as what we're being led to believe it does.
I don't either.
I actually think Wood potentially hits harder. It's a great fight. I'm so super excited. I believe we'll be doing a watch along as we always do. But I think Wood will win that fight. If he's not aged with inactivity, and I know they're a similar age, but as you said last night, Kakachi has got momentum and he's got a little bit more activity. Lee Wood has been sat on the shelf. Whether he's been training or not, it's not the same as being in active fight camps. And that's the only worry for me with Lee Wood is I know he historically starts slow, but is he going to maintain the slowness because he's going to be sluggish because he's not got that momentum from being in fights? Is it going to take him longer to get into the groove? And by that
Yep.
time, is he too far behind? Has he been knocked down a couple of... Because I believe there'll be knockdowns in that fight. It's inevitable that there will be knockdowns. But I'm expecting Wood to win.
The activity is the big question for me. So since Lee Wood fought Josh Warrington, Kakachi's had 4 fights. This is his 5th fight in that time frame where Lee Wood has argued publicly with Matchroom, been at every single British broadcast promoted show, flirting with them at ringside. We commented on it on lives. He's been everywhere. Wasserman, GBM.
He's done the rounds, mate. Matchroom. He's done the rounds.
He's done the rounds, and now he's got an opportunity. But I mean, Deanto Kakachi is a puncher thing. Is inflated by what he done to Joe Cordina. Before he fought Joe Cordina, he hadn't had a stoppage in 5 years. In his 1 fight since, he didn't look like stopping Josh Warrington, even though he gave it his all. So there's the reality. We're now 6 years, 1 stoppage. Don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic stoppage of the champion. But if we want to talk about how many stoppages Lee Wood's got in the last 6 years, I don't know. I reckon it's 8 or 9, if we're being honest. There's the difference in it. The puncher in this fight is Lee Wood, and the puncher whose power stays right until the 12th round is Lee Wood.
We've seen it.
He was 5-1 or 6-0 down against Josh Warrington when he stopped him in the 7th round. That's the reality. He was losing. He'd have lost
by 3 or 4 rounds, I think, or at least 2 against Conlon. At least.
Yeah. It probably would have been 3 rounds with a knockdown, because remember, he was knocked down in the first. So that's the reality. He can pull it out of the fire. So as I said last night, 2 minutes 50 gone at the 12th round, and you think Kakachi's on his way to points victory. Don't blink, because Lee Wood will try and deliver.
The only thing I'm worried about, and again, it stems from the inactivity, is how many times can you do that, though, Liam? How many times can you go to the well, get up off your back? There's been a few times where Lee Wood's been out, mate. He's been out other than his eyes closed, and he's come back from that. There's only so many times you can do that.
And that is the thing, mate. It's not as if he's stayed on a roll. And as you said, we know he's stayed ticking over with Ben Davidson down in Essex. We know he's been doing it because he's a consummate professional. But hitting pads and sparring compared to doing it under the lights on a fight night is a very different thing. I do think that Lee Wood will need to start faster. He'll need to not hold his feet so much, because that's when he gets caught and dropped. It's not because he's, easy to hit. It's because he gets high off of his own work. He holds his feet and then he takes punches that he should be out of the way of. He can't do that on Saturday, regardless of the fact that we've kind of panned and played down Kakachi's stoppage record. The reality is, if Lee Wood does hold his feet, if he does leave his chin there, Kakachi will find it. And after two and a bit years of 18 months of inactivity, that's when your chin's tested the most, isn't it? How many times have we seen it? Fighters come back off a long layoff and their chin isn't what it once was. Their reactions times aren't the same as they were once. And that's what lets them down. They still have the will and the desire, but some of the fundamentals that they base their career off are gone. And I do worry that might be the case for Lee.
Yeah, possibly. I'm hoping not. And I've picked him to win. But, this could be one of those fights that goes down to the last round. But like you said, we've seen Lee Wood come back from the brink. Can Kakachi sustain enough to keep Wood off him for 12 rounds? I'm intrigued by it, man. It's definitely a pick-em fight.
Yeah, look, I'm not around for the prediction tomorrow, so I'm happy to give mine now. I think Wood wins it on points. I know we sort of made the argument yesterday, Wood stoppage, Kakachi points. I think the reality is Lee Wood, after the time out the ring again, isn't going to want to take too many risks. He probably believes that as a boxer, he has the boxing ability to beat Anto Kakachi. We're going to get a good fight. We're going to get competitive rounds, but I think you're looking at an 8-4, 9-3 on the scorecards. That's actually closer from what we see, if that makes sense. I just think Lee Wood's ring IQ, as long as he hasn't dropped off too far, will be enough to see him through, and he won't want to take too many risks.
So you're going Wood. UD?
I reckon so, mate. Yeah, I reckon so.
Well, my prediction's getting saved to tomorrow night. You can find out on SW Fight Hub's YouTube channel at around 7:30. I think I gave mine last night. I think Wood stops him late. I think Wood gets to him late. But the great thing is, we'll know by this time next week. We will already know. Yeah, I think that wraps us up for this week, episode
That's it,
13. So
That's
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that's interacted with us, DJ Pat, Sam, Mad Mitch, Sam over at SW Fight Hub's YouTube channel, and X. So get yourself over there if you haven't subscribed or followed Sam. His content is the reason I started doing content. So yeah, follow my guy, Liam_Tully9. You've got on Jay's Fight Talk, Liam does a show as well as the show Straight Talk weekly show with myself that we're on now. He does Liam's Fight Night Picks. Have we got one out tomorrow?
There should be one coming out tomorrow.
There will be one, and there's an archive over there on Jay's Fight Talk YouTube channel. As always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as always, keep punching. Thank you very much. I will see you next week. Thanks again, Liam. Take care, brother.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching, guys.
It will let me end this somewhere. It always does this. My button disappears on my iPad.